Nothing is more important to the success of a startup than the first 10 engineers you hire. That's why I started First 10. Hi, I'm Boris Epstein, CEO of First 10, and with me is my colleague,
Alexis Munger. Hi. At First 10, we work with early founders to help build early engineering teams.
And this is the First 10 podcast, where we bring you valuable insights on building early engineering teams from all sides of the equation. Engineers, founders, even investors. On today's episode of the First 10 podcast, we're talking to Sophie Novati. That was a really interesting conversation with Sophie.
Yeah.
What really stood out to me is her focus on mission. And she was, explicit about saying that she is a mission-driven founder.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to hear about how that mission came out in her engineering days at Facebook and then at Nextdoor, how she was able to parlay that mission into some of the boot camp work that she did, and then the founding of Formation, which is, essentially a service that helps and works with great engineers to kind of be their best selves.
Yeah.
But just the kind of explicit focus on mission and the way that was a nice kind of through line really stood out to me.
Yeah. I think it's a really admirable mission and one I'm glad somebody's tackling because, when you go through and you observe a certain amount of interviews over the course of I don't know how many years now, there's always, these edge cases where you really think that there's more to somebody than the interview was able to uncover. And you often wonder, did we get this wrong? Did we not pick up a right signal? And, because I think that there is a big difference between being really good at interviewing and also being really good at software engineering. And I don't know that we always get it right. So having this mission of trying to get, of helping engineers kind of brush up those skills and really be able to showcase what they know, it's so cool because it really is interviewing, especially in tech, is very intense and it's like a skill set all of in itself. So, and I think it's super admirable what she's doing.
I agree with you 100%. I'll go one step further and say that we often get it wrong.
Yeah.
With regards to using an interview to determine eventual success. Wasn't there a study? Didn't Google do a study that basically confirmed there was no correlation between interview success and on-the-job performance?
I think you're right. I want to say, was it Laszlo Block? I think he wrote something about this.
Yeah.
I think it was him. I'm making that up. But yeah. And so I don't know. It's something that I've always wondered about. And I think it's great somebody's inspired to do something about that.
I agree. I think the more better engineers can do in interviews, the more shots engineers will have at the actual roles. And then the more great work companies will get the chance to see done together.
Yes.
Today, we're joined by someone who knows firsthand that the first 10 engineers you hire can make or break your startup. But she didn't just learn that lesson. She built a whole company around it. We are joined today by Sophie Novati, founder and CEO of Formation, a company that's on a mission to build a more equitable tech industry, one exceptional engineer at a time. Sophie's journey is fascinating. She was at Facebook during its explosive early days, soaking up that infectious move fast and break things energy. She then joined Nextdoor as a key early engineer, helping to shape their mobile platform. But along the way, she saw firsthand the challenges of finding and hiring top talent. Frustrated by the lack of diversity and the missed potential of so many brilliant individuals, Sophie took a leap of faith. She took Mark Zuckerberg's late night chess advice to heart, capture people's valuable attention, and the rest will follow. And with that, Formation was born. We're going to hear all about Sophie's path to founder, the lessons she's learned along the way, and her insights on building a thriving engineering team from the ground up. So get ready, founders and future founders, because you're about to get a masterclass in engineering talent. Sophie Novati, welcome to the First 10 podcast.
Welcome.
Woo, thank you so much for the intro for us. And super excited to be here.
You're welcome. Super excited for you to be here as well. How did we do? How was that intro?
That was a great, it's always interesting to hear the summary of your life when you're so day to day zoomed in on your today work. You're like, oh yeah, I did all that. So Thanks for the refresher.
Really good for you to be here.
But yeah, I mean, to add a little bit of context to all of that as well, when I was at Facebook, and especially when I was at Nextdoor, I was, one of those engineers that was super just involved in thinking about our interview practices and thinking about how we interview, hire, onboard, train all the new engineers on my teams. I was one of the people that probably did a few hundred interviews during my few years there. And I was just consistently finding that people from, historically underrepresented groups and non-traditional educational backgrounds just to be stuck on the same interview processes. And it was really frustrating for me. And I spent many years prior to formation actually mentoring in a bunch of different capacities, trying to figure out how to bridge the skills gap. And, at the time, we were in a tech industry that cared about diversity and really wanted to have more of it. But the solution kind of was just, let's give out more interview opportunities without really inspecting kind of what the blockers really were that were preventing people from being successful. And to me, I was, observing that so many people coming from these non-traditional education pathways, they're getting 16 weeks of training. And you compare that to, 4-year degree at Stanford, and you can't be shocked that there's a difference in how prepared people were to perform at the job and at the interviews. And so I guess ultimately I was seeing kind of the solutions on the market were just not meeting the needs of the people and the businesses on the market trying to hire. And so I guess that was kind of like the bridge that caused formation to happen.
That's so cool. I love that you had insider expertise at, high growth technology companies, successful technology companies like Facebook and Nextdoor, and then were able to kind of convey some of those experiences and passion into building a startup. You were at Facebook during buzzing energy days. What was it like in the early days at Facebook? Paint us a picture of that environment.
So Facebook was my very first job out of college. And it really, I think, warped my sense of what professional life was like. It was my first kind of exposure to work. And it was a fascinating place to be at the time. And I think just to help you kind of understand how crazy it was, one of the big problems that we had to solve at the time was that we had to figure out a way to have Friday morning meetings, which were deemed impossible at the time because the interns were all staying overnight at the office and sleeping in all of the conference rooms. And as such, it was impossible to have any meetings because there were none available. So there were many solutions put into place for this problem. And, we have a bunch of engineers, a bunch of smart engineers. So solutions were made, one of which was, I think it was something like a 2 a.m. shuttle trying to get people home. Another one of which was just to kind of ignore the problem. One of my intern friends actually told me he woke up one day in a conference room in the middle of a meeting. They just decided to not awake him, and so he decided he had to. Wow. Anyway, it's all fun and games and such, but I think the thing that's actually worth taking away from this story, if anything, was that what really, really blew my mind was that I was observing an environment in which people loved their work. Mm-hmm. And growing up, where, I was a cashier working hour to hour, at my local convenience store, I thought work was just the thing that no one wanted to do in order to get through the rest of our lives. Yeah. And that's my relationship with work for the majority of my growing up. And you may think like, people were goofing around at work at 2 a.m. and that's why they loved the job. But it was very much the other way around. It was people were so absorbed with the problems that they were solving that they couldn't get themselves to leave. And I'm not saying, again, this environment is the right environment for everyone to be in. But for me, it was the first time where it dawned on me that someone could show up at work and enjoy it and be fulfilled by it and be having the type of impact that they wanted. And to me, this is maybe another one of the reasons that formation came about, was just thinking of how much better the world would be if everyone could wake up to work that felt that way.
That's crazy. That's very intense too. And not what I was I thought you were going to say about why they couldn't have Friday meetings. Like that wasn't what I thought was going to be. And waking up in a conference room while everybody else is meeting, I would die, but that'd be so funny. That's great.
Not for everyone.
Maybe this incident was it, but like, was there a particular moment or incident that you remember from that time or even from next door, but has anything kind of stuck that's really like shaped how you think about things now?
I mean, I think that, and this story we had briefly mentioned earlier, but another thing about this time, and really, I think that this isn't just unique to Facebook, to be honest. I think it's very much the tech industry as a whole. I experienced the same thing at Nextdoor as well. Maybe I was less shocked by it, but really, a lot of the tech industry, and I'm definitely not going to go ahead and say all, but a lot of the tech industry is filled with passionate people who want to solve problems. And I'm not even going to say they're solving them in right or good ways, but there's a lot of people who are passionate about what they're working on. And one of the magical things about being an engineer is you're so unrestricted in terms of the problem areas that you can apply your skill set to, right? Like you could really make an impact in any industry that you really feel passionately about. To answer your question about like a moment in time, I think I definitely have a distinct memory early on when I was an intern at Facebook. And during this time, Facebook is, and it may be hard to remember or relate to this now, but at the time, Facebook was not considered to be a great business at all. It was always like, oh, it's that hot company that it's like in a hype cycle. Yeah. Growth is through the roof, but how are they ever going to make money? They're never going to be a real business. And that was when I was at intern at the time, that was the height of kind of this feeling. And I remember going straight to Zuck. I think it must have been, it was definitely like in the AM. So like maybe like 1 a.m., something like that. And I remember we were playing chess at the time, and it was him and a bunch of interns. And I posed this question directly to him, like how are you going to make money? How is this going to be a business?
Yeah.
And I remember he didn't think about it at all. He just like looked at me with the most casual reaction and just said, if you're able to capture people's valuable attention, you can always figure out how to turn that into money later. And this is another blow my mind kind of moment where I was just like, wow, all this like attention is just like this potential energy of some sort that's just waiting to be turned into cash.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable insight. You can almost kind of like, there's so many Zuck interviews out there. You can almost kind of like hear those words coming out of his mouth. That's cool that it kind of proved true.
Certainly.
Curious about that game of chess. So how is Mark at chess? How was the match? Like, what was it? Like, tell us about the game. Who won?
I mean, if I were to summarize how the match went, I would say that I won.
Yeah.
Twice in a row, quite decidedly. But it's okay. It was actually this specific type of chess that is pretty crazy. It's called Bug House. And I definitely spent a lot of my intern days playing this game. But basically you have 4 people. And if I'm like playing white on chess, then I'm playing against someone who's playing black. My team member will sit directly next to me, so to my right. If I'm playing white piece, then my team member is playing black. So on my move, if I take one of the black pieces from my opponent, I actually give that piece to my team member who's also playing black.
Oh.
And as a move, they can choose to drop that piece in a place instead of moving one of their own, which basically makes it so that being good at chess is irrelevant to the game.
Yeah.
And it's very fast paced, and it's all kinds of chaos, and it's a lot of fun.
That sounds crazy.
I wish I could tie some kind of engineering skill to this, but really it was just fun, and that's it.
That's great.
I have to look into that. I need to watch a video of a live game.
It's definitely, I think it's one of those you should experience it type of things.
Seriously.
One day. I'll set it up for us.
It's funny that this came up because I've been recently playing a lot on my phone. Like I'm actually kind of low-key obsessed. I keep asking everybody in my family to play chess with me, and my husband's like, "No, I don't want to play chess right now."
I'll play chess with you, Alexis. I love play chess.
Thank you. Somebody please play chess with me. But what was his opening move? Actually, I'm kind of dying to know because like I want to like really nail that down.
I can't remember any of the moves at this
Maybe
point.
we should know Sophie's opening move.
What's your favorite opening move?
I think I do the classic boring, like pawn in the middle forward, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes if I'm feeling like crazy adventurous, I move the one on the left instead of the one on the right, you know?
Yeah, really mix it up.
It's one of those days.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh, recently, actually, you know, Facebook since this time has really changed to really knowing you quite well. And one of the things is I think I looked up one like chess puzzle thing one time, and now my feed is filled with these types of. Do you get them too?
Yeah, I do.
It's like it's like a picture of like a move, and then you're trying to figure out how to get checkmate. I get caught on those all the time.
I haven't seen that yet.
And I'm sending them to people. I'm going to send them to you.
Yeah,
now.
I have a feeling I'm going to start seeing them now that it's go.
I'm going to send you one, and then the algorithm will learn.
Love it.
Yeah.
So after Facebook, you joined Nextdoor, also a very successful technology company. What was the key differences between those two opportunities, and anything kind of meaningful that you took from your Nextdoor experience?
So I would say that both companies were very fast paced and had a very just iterative build and development process in the whole spectrum of things. But relatively, I would say that Facebook was definitely a little bit more reckless and reckless maybe is too much of a word, but it was a little bit like chat was invented during a hackathon and they were just kind of like, okay, let's just release it. And Facebook at the time was also known for a lot of kind of little bugs. And that was definitely a little bit different at Nextdoor. And that Nextdoor was the first time that I actually really learned what a development process was.
Yeah.
You know,
It's hilarious.
and like having, you know, designers who provided you with detailed specs on things and a certain level of attention to detail that I never had to encounter at Facebook. I remember sitting there with my designer one day late in the evening working on our feed. We were about to ship a new feed to the mobile app on Nextdoor, and we were going through, there's hundreds of combinations of types of stories and like what story needs what like submodule. And there's like hundreds of different combinations for how a story would show up. And each of these combinations would have like slightly different spacing considerations. And we were going through as many combinations as possible and pixel by pixel making sure that it was correct. And that type of detailed work and craft, I would say, was something new that I had experienced. Yeah, and at Nextdoor, I learned a lot more about how teams outside of engineering worked. To be honest, at Facebook, it was so engineering driven. Like engineers really decided what to build and kind of designed their way through. And things have changed for what it's worth now. Things are quite different now. But at the time, I remember just thinking like, hey, what do the other people at the company do?
Yeah.
Like, why are they here? And I learned a lot more about that at Nextdoor. Yeah, just like getting things through design, through product, through legal marketing, and how everyone works together to, you know, put together a launch for a product.
Yeah. It's funny to think about the differences just between the two. I'm curious, like I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and I think you joined Nextdoor right at the same time that I started working with them to kind of go through like a really big hiring sprint with them. And I definitely remember mobile being like very challenging role to hire for in addition to like all the other roles that we were working on. But I remember you being you were really part of the hiring process, I think, at Nextdoor, or at least I think I remember that. I don't know. Our producer also found out that like you were part of the new hire buddy program there.
Yeah.
Did that kind of help you? Did any of that experience kind of bleed into, you know, like how formation, like I'm curious if that experience kind of carried over into what you're doing now.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you say the word the buddy program. That was one of the things that I really championed. And so to the point that like, okay, I don't know if actually anyone at Nextdoor knows I did this, but So after when I was leaving, one of the biggest things that I was worried about was my baby, the buddy program.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that it was still running after I left. And so I found a person to hand it off to. Now, I probably should have worked more with leadership to make sure that this was actually like established as part of some kind of bigger process. But at the time, I was just like, hey, like this person's going to, and he was actually the very first buddy who like recipient of the program. So he joined and he was the first person to receive a buddy.
Yay.
And I like set him up to take over the program. And actually for 6 months after I had left, I kept having monthly meetings with him to be like, how is the buddy program going? And I asked for updates and I like gave him instructions on what to do. Or sorry, that's probably maybe too much. I helped brainstorm with him and help him continue to keep the vision alive.
That's amazing.
But it was something that I really, really cared about because at the time it was embarrassing. It was, engineers were joining the team, and at Facebook, it was a huge thing that every single person had to ship code on day one. And it wasn't really like a productive thing. We never shipped anything that was useful. It was just the mentality of setting the tone that we are moving quickly. And Nextdoor had this too, but not on onboarding. Onboarding was slow. And it was, to the point that people would spend their entire first week, first of all, not doing anything productive, just setting up their environments and kind of feeling dumb.
Yeah.
Because most people aren't onboarding.
Yeah.
And so you're the only person struggling with things left and right and feeling like, am I doing things right? Like not knowing who to ask questions to. And so, the onboarding buddy program was meant to be every person gets someone outside of the reporting chain that they can ask questions to and make sure that they get their environment set up by day one. But I think that for me, education and how someone is supported through their career has always just been a huge part of, I guess, just what I naturally think about is like when someone doesn't succeed in an interview, I was like, what caused that?
Yeah.
Like what point in their experience were they missing something that they didn't have something that someone else did, right? And trying to figure out those gaps is just kind of where my brain naturally kind of gravitates towards. And slowly being more and more frustrated by the non-answers I was finding kind of eventually led to me taking this problem head on.
Ah, that's awesome.
I love hearing that. I love that as you're telling your stories, there's like, some semblance of what I could imagine to be some, seeds planted that eventually, turned into what you're doing with formation. So you're an engineer growing into engineering leadership. How does that convert into being a founder? Like, how did you go from the idea of formation to like quitting, incorporating, starting something new? Like, how does that work?
So I think there's like 3 different types of founders in terms of like why someone becomes a founder. One is just being driven by a mission. 2 is driven by the idea of being your own boss and creating something from scratch, the idea of being a founder. And then 3 is being motivated by the financial upside of being successful in a startup.
Yeah.
So for me, I am very, very much in the first camp. Very much had no idea I wanted to be a founder, not really motivated by upside as much personally, and just kept on working on the problem and being like, why isn't anyone else building things the right way? But speaking of like thinking about how I started formation, there is 2 very specific thought exercises that I had that made up my decision for me. So the first one was the deathbed exercise, which is an exercise I actually highly recommend to every individual, which is basically just imagining yourself at the end of your life surrounded by, everyone that you're close to or maybe that you had an impact on, and thinking about like what gives you satisfaction and fulfillment in that moment. And I think this exercise for me, for whatever it's worth, I was either just really into it, was really able to put on that hat, but for me, almost in an instant, I feel like changed my value system in life. Like I realized very quickly how little any material possessions meant, first of all. I'm like dead. I have no need for this. And also like how much my title in my job meant to me, right? And I was just drawn to like being able to have an impact on people and feeling like I had that impact on as many people as possible. And I think for me, also realizing that education was the thing that gave me all my opportunities in life. And so for me, that was kind of how I wanted to have impact on people. So that was how I found, I think, my mission and purpose. And then the second thought exercise was, sorry, this is too off on a deep end on something, but
no, it's great. It's really powerful.
I was thinking about playing this game of Sims. I don't know if you remember that game, but it's like, all these people in this house or whatever. And I had this moment where there's this bug in this game. And I was imagining that I was playing this world of Sims, but I, for some reason, all of a sudden only had access to this one person in the world. And I was like, oh man, so if I only have one person through which I can have impact on this world, what would I have this one person do? And, that is kind of the situation that we're all in. And so thinking about how much impact can I have in this world in this mission to spread equitable access to equitable education to everyone, if I only have control over myself, and what would I have this person do? And I realized instantly that I wasn't going to have this person spend the next 10 years of their life climbing a career ladder. Like they don't have that much time. They need to get started. And so that day I had decided that I need to do this. And I gave a long notice. I gave, I think, something like 6 months notice to leave the role. But I think I remember giving that notice like a day or two after having this thought exercise.
Wow. I love that. So you had the exercise, you kind of then made the decision, and then you acted on it in the form of notice. And then I imagine that was the beginning. That was the formation of formation.
Yeah. Well, honestly, prior to formation, I spent 2 years running my own boot camp, actually. So there was actually still a couple of years between that and then starting formation eventually.
Okay.
But I was running my own in-person boot camp that was very focused on helping people go from 0 to 1. And I did everything. I basically wrote the curriculum, taught all the classes, graded all the homework, helped people find jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it was a lot. So I was only really able to run the program for 6 people at a time. And I think I ran 5 or 6 cohorts like that.
Wow.
So tell us about formation. So you've been running now for several years. I know you've grown the team. I know you've had a lot of people through the program. Tell us about formation. What are y'all up to right now?
Yeah. So the first thing about formation is that we don't have any fixed curriculum. And the reason for that is, in my years of working with engineers from all backgrounds, all seniority levels, the one thing that I found was constant was that every person was different. Every person has a different educational background, different amount of skill level and various types of skills, and have different career goals, right? And therefore, every person, the types of support and training that they need is completely different. I have this thing where I hope that if formation is successful, we'll one day think about the traditional education of model as being absurd, right? Like where you have a semester of classes and every class is scheduled for you before you even start the course, right? Like that should sound insane one day. It's like, how could you possibly know in 3 months what class I'm going to need before I've even shown you how I'm going to be able to perform and absorb the material on day one, right? And so really for us, we don't do that. We don't have a fixed curriculum. The platform assumes nothing about you. So you join formation and we benchmark your skills. We kind of identify the areas that are skill gaps. We provide you some personalized training. We set you up with personalized mentorship sessions, and then we benchmark you again, see if you are now meeting the performance expectations. If so, then you move on to a more difficult topic. And if not, we give you more training, more mentorship until you are able to demonstrate performance. And at the core, that's what we do. And that's how we're able to support successfully people from such a diverse slate of backgrounds. We have people we're supporting that are brand new to tech, ranging all the way up to, super senior engineers, staff, and principal level is very rare, but, up to 10, 15 years of experience.
Wow. That's really cool. So, you've interviewed hundreds of engineers at this point, I'm sure, right? So what do you think are like some common mistakes that you see engineers make during like a technical interview that just like if it's easily avoided or not? But I'd be curious to hear like what your perspective is on that.
Yeah. And the most common mistakes have actually been shifting over time, which I'm really happy to see, because it means that people are overall kind of starting to learn and change. And the most common mistakes are shifting. I would say this one is one of the ones that I'm see is starting to shift. Like some people coming in already know that this is a problem, but it's hard to fix, even if you're aware that it's a problem, is thinking that the coding interview is about coding. And coding interviews are only maybe 40% about coding. So much of it is about how you're exploring the problem space, understanding what the constraints are in your problem. Imagine you hire a contractor to build your back deck and they're like, all right. And they start breaking out the tools and start doing stuff right away. You're like, excuse me, like, don't you have any questions for me? Like what I want it to look like, all the, and so exploring the problem space, understanding performance expectations, exploring different possible paths forward, right? Like a good contractor might present you with multiple options for decks at different price points and different considerations, right? And then ultimately being able to weigh the pros and cons between those approaches, making judgment calls on which ones to implement, then coding, that piece, there is coding, and then also testing and proving that your solution works, right? Like imagine the contractor puts in the last nail and just off they go. It's like, are you going to step on the deck and, test its structural integrity, right?
Right.
And so again, picking the right test cases to kind of systematically prove correctness is a whole skill in and of itself. And so there's just so many steps that go into the coding interview that's beyond simply, typing out the solution.
Yeah, that tracks. I see that a lot in feedback.
You see.
And you just see it. You see like some of these things, but that's really interesting. And that's one of the things that you think is changing now. And that's like the common error, is that used to be
I do think people are starting to come in and demonstrating a lot more awareness that this is something that they need to improve in. So like when I say like, hey, coding's not just code, I'm not like I used to be faced with like blank stares, like as if I'm like making this up to like justify my program or something like that. And it's not. Now people are like, right. But how do I change that behavior? How do I do that? Right. And that's kind of where some of the training comes in, because it's very hard to be like, here's, 6 steps. And if it was that easy to change, then I would not be working on this business.
And then they're even also looking at how well do you collaborate? Are you talking out loud as you're, like there's all these different things that they're assessing, and it's not just about your code.
Yeah. There you go. I can tell you've read some feedback cards on interviews.
Oh yeah.
That's funny. It's like I'm hearing you. The way you're talking about is almost like the multidimensional nature of what it takes to build a product, from the lens of an engineer. And it's so true. I'm curious, going from engineer to founder yourself, right? I mean, talk about, multidimensional, right? What are, some of the things that you would say were critical to your, learnings as an engineer that helped you achieve the success that you've achieved as a founder? Because there's so many engineers that think about, or that kind of, want to take that step to start their own company.
So it's interesting because when I talk to engineering founders, I feel like the first thing that I say is learn about the functions outside of engineering. And because that for me was one of the big things, was I just had, and again, I mentioned this, but I felt like I opened my eyes when I went to Nextdoor from Facebook, which was extremely engineering driven. But for me, like I would say, even though coding is like not 100% of your job, it is the primary focus of your job. And there are so many other dimensions that go into founding a successful business. And, especially now in the current atmosphere of the tech industry, there's more of an expectation that founders are building sound businesses, it's kind of crazy to think that this is now an expectation that a business actually has to have a good business model. But for a long time, tech was just kind of held outside of those norms in terms of expectations. And I think the recent tech bubble has really shifted things, and I think actually in a good way. Now, I don't think it should go too far. There's definitely phases in a company's life cycle where you have no idea, right? And your goal in life is to experiment and try different things, but the goal should be to converge into a business model that works. One of the interesting stories I remember reading about was this business that went out of business, it shut down, and there was this outpouring of just love from people who were disappointed that this business couldn't work out. And, not to poo-poo on that too much, but there was also this very interesting sub-thread that was happening that was memorable to me, which was people were saying how the business was constantly selling goods at a loss. And they were constantly giving things away and refunding people no matter what. And, they're like, if your business is, I'm going to give you $10 and you give me $5 back, then of course people are going to be happy with you. It's a very easy business to build, to have people be super satisfied customers, right? But that's not actually a business model. And you have to figure out how to align the incentives in such a way such that you're able to offer an experience that feels like getting $10 or $5, but that is actually a sustainable business model that allows you to grow the business and pay your employees who are working on it really well, right? And also be solving an actual problem for people. And so I think for me, actually, I don't spend any time coding anymore, because that doesn't mean that you won't be coding, as in lots of engineering founders spend a lot of time coding. But I would say that for me, I have primarily found other ways to leverage other skills to make impact on the business. Now, I do want to add maybe one point that's engineering related, which is that step-by-step thing that I mentioned to you in terms of engineering problem solving. At Formation, we actually call this the engineering method. And it roughly is, explore the problem space, ask questions, go wide and consider a bunch of different options. 3 is weigh the pros and cons of different options and then choose one, execute judgment call. You're going to have to accept the cons that come with the pros of whatever solution you choose. 4, implement it. That might be an implementation in terms of code. It might even be implementation in terms of a process, right? But whatever it is, implement it. Number 5 is validate the results, right? Through data, through testing, whatever, through user interviews, right? And I think that engineering method is the same, whether it is you're solving a coding prompt or you're solving a product problem. And so that kind of engineering and invention cycle, I think, is consistent. You're just using a different set of, skills to execute it.
I love that. That sounds really empowering. I can imagine a person sitting in that seat who has the kind of muscle and ability to operate within that, to feel like, wow, they could really kind of use their full abilities to go make the impact that they're there to make.
As an engineer, all you need is a laptop and access to the internet, and there is a world of possibilities. So yeah, if you can imagine it, you can build it.
Facts. So Sophie, what are you working on now? What does the future hold for Formation? All of our wonderful audience of engineers and founders who are listening to this, what could they do for you and what you're trying to do at Formation?
Yeah, well, ultimately, right now we have just under 500 students going through the training program at Formation. And we always decided that we were going to start with an extremely high touch program that's relatively expensive, but that really specializes in getting people into the top tier tech jobs. And I think on that front, we've been successful. Meta and Amazon are 2 top placed companies right now. So people are really consistently going to top tier companies. So far this year, the average compensation increase has been well over $100,000, which is kind of wild to me. But, ultimately our vision is to go beyond, a few hundred or even a few thousand people. The fact is we're building an education platform, and, we want for someday not just, a few thousand people to be on it, but ultimately that all 12 million engineers in the world using and engaging with Formation in some way throughout their careers to continuously invest in their skills. And, we're still very, very focused on building the fellowship today, but ultimately we also have our eyes on kind of a bigger slice of the pie.
That's great.
Exciting. So go sign up if you're listening.
Do it. Go sign up.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if an engineer is either stuck in their career or wants to advance their career or is just interview prepping, feel free, please have them check out Formation. Obviously, if you're hiring engineers, would love to be connected. And we have a network of 500 mid to senior level-ish amazing engineers who I would love to introduce you to.
Awesome.
We would like to meet some of those engineers.
Yeah, we would. Always.
Well, we should definitely chat.
Yeah. Is there a question that we missed asking you today, or one you were hoping that we would have asked?
I think maybe there's one around advice for founders and early engineers? You kind of asked it, actually, but I have another answer if you want to hear it.
Boris, you should ask her. You should ask that question.
Okay, I'll wait for you to ask.
Sophie, what is the most important piece of advice you would give to someone who is about to embark on their journey as an early engineer or a founder? Tell us.
So I think my answer to this one is a little bit cheesy, but it is so true if you're going to embark on the journey of being a founder. And before I give it, I would actually say my number one piece of advice to, aspiring founders is to don't become one. Because I usually try to spend my first time trying to figure out what exactly it is that they want to get out of this. Because oftentimes people aren't aware of the realities of what building a company actually entails. There's so much that goes into it, and you have to be ready for some of the most brutal journey that you could possibly imagine. And so I first spend a lot of time trying to convince people to maybe consider not doing it. But if you want to do it, then the thing that I think is just absolutely critical is to figure out a way to absolutely love your work. And I meet a lot of founders, a lot of even just engineers, or even just people in general who spend a lot of their lives just in anxiety. And, I say this, and I'm definitely a hypocrite in some way. I'm like, constantly gulping L-theanine and all kinds of things and being anxious about being anxious and all that kind of stuff. But to some degree, like, some anxiety is normal, right? And if you're not anxious ever, something else is probably wrong. But what I mean to say is that with all of the hard work, sometimes sleepless nights, it has to be worth it to you. You have to have such a deeply anchored sense of fulfillment in the grand scheme of things to get you past. There's going to be so many hard things, unexpected, unpleasant surprises that comes your way every day. And, you need some wind in your sails that pushes you past those hurdles. And, I think what you love looks very, very different for different people. For some people, it's getting to work on specific technical challenges, right? Like as an engineer, they love a specific tech stack, or they really want to work on AI, right? Like something like that, right? That brings ultimate fulfillment. Yeah. For some, it's the mission, right? Like they really just want to be working on improving the world in a very specific way, whether it's healthcare, education, what have you. For me, that's education. And for others, it's the team. You almost don't really care what problem you're working on or, what coding languages you're using. It's really just the team that you get to wake up and solve problems with every day. And to some extent, you actually, like, all of these things, like, are shades of gray. Like, people care about all of them to some degree. But I think it's important to kind of recognize with yourself, and it may not be any of these three things, right? Like, what is it that really ultimately at the end of the day brings you fulfillment? And really choose those core set of things and do everything you can to kind of optimize and align your life around those things.
I love that. And then for that person that has that, obviously worth it for the founder that can connect to all that you just shared.
Yeah. There's days that's hard, and there's also days that are absolutely amazing. So as a founder, you're ready for that roller coaster of life.
I love that. Well, congrats again on everything you're doing with Formation. I'm so excited about what you built. We had the chance to get to know it a little bit. I could see us definitely benefiting from some follow-up conversations about all that. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with our audience all your cool stories. I'm really excited to have this go live. Thank you again, Sophie. I hope you enjoyed.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It was a blast. Thank you so much.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what you thought of our episode on our Twitter or LinkedIn. Look for the links in the show notes. Both Alexis and I are not professional podcasters, as I'm sure you could tell. We just love talking about early stage startups.
And if there's a recruiting related question you'd like answered, or you could use help with anything hiring related, jump on our website. It's www.first10.com. That's 1st10.com. And we'll do our best to get that answered for you.
Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. My name is Boris, and with me is
Alexis Munger.
And we'll see you next time on the First 10 Podcast.
Bye.